This is the first edition of the Khoodeelaar campaign. World exclusive diagnosis of Fleet Street, that is the British newspapers. Now, the Times, and we shall assume knowledge on the part of whoever is viewing this, of some of the exclusive tags that we attach to these papers. Like, for example, the Times, the full description we use about it is the dirty digger Rupert Murdoch owned the Times newspaper. So we'll just call it Times on the assumption that that detailed description is understood and accepted and assumed to be part of our references to the Times. Now, the Times today, the front page main lead is police vow to find the lockdown refuseniks. And yet, the truth is partially reported by the Daily Star, which is saying that Boris Johnson has broken the rules. And it says the government advice is crystal clear. Don't travel outside your local area. So why is Boris Johnson out on his bike 7 miles from Downing Street? That's the correct statement and question. And it has got a view of the length of the list of Boris Johnson's flouting of the rules in a comical way, in a parodic way, is the part 125. And the main content of the copy on the front page under the honk honk reads, the Prime Minister went for a 7-mile bike ride after telling the rest of the country to stay local and save lives. What a clown. Now that is absolutely factual. What a clown. And the Daily Mirror, which is owned by the same stable that the Daily Star belongs to, reads, just get a grip. Virus rules confusion. Now, the Daily Mirror, as we have said, is too timid and too stupid. It is not confusion. It's lying and criminal lying. And underneath the just to get a grip, it reads, government threatens harder lockdown if people don't follow rules. But Johnson goes for bike ride across London. Number 10 Downing Street insists it won't specify what local exercise means, and they still cannot tell us if you are allowed to take away tea on your walk. Now, that is not true. They still can't tell. That is not true. What the truth is that the number 10 Downing Street, which is the official kind of residence of the incumbent in the post of Prime Minister, which currently is Boris Johnson, it's that they don't want to tell. Not that they still can't tell, but they don't want to and they don't tell. A very significant difference between the two statements or phrases. And then they run this 2-page spread on the pages 4 and 5 of the Daily Mirror. The coronavirus crisis, yet more rules, confusion. Again, this is a completely stupid word. Confusion is not the word. It's lying. And then they've got this one. It's not confusion at all. And the Daily Mirror of today, Tuesday, the 12th of January 2021, is one of the papers that is hiding, that is covering up the other lies, the main lies. The main lies include the fact that the papers are not running the statistics about the areas where the virus is spreading, the higher or lower, whatever the number, whatever the statistics, they are not publishing the details and the data. Nor is the government website, nor is any of the local kind of websites or the NHS. So if people don't know, if people are denied the facts of what is going on in their area, how are they to behave in accordance with the need to prevent themselves being affected? And that is the biggest con represented and typified by the Fleet Street so-called newspapers. They are covering up. They are covering up and they're lying. And they're lying as irresponsibly and as cruelly and as corruptly as the Boris Johnson-fronted cabal is doing. Now, here is an ironic kind of stance taken by Angela Merkel. Because Angela Merkel was probably the only head of a government in the EU or in Western Europe, or in fact anywhere in the world, who issued a statement denouncing the neo-fascistic line that Donald Trump adopted immediately after he was inaugurated. And she is now criticizing, or at least making a position statement critical of Twitter banning Trump. And she's saying that this is an attack on free speech. Now, this is not lost on most people who have been observing Angela Merkel's response to Trump being installed at number 10, at the White House. So most people would read this, as I have read this, as an ironic, almost satirical kind of take by Angela Merkel. I mean, her criticism of Twitter won't be necessary or needed by Twitter or by the American kind of people who are allegedly campaigning for democracy and restoration of the Constitution. Because Twitter has obviously allowed Trump the kind of license that it has done for the last 5 years, precisely because Twitter is a business. And the fact that the incumbent in the post of the USA president has daily used Twitter more than once has had its commercial value in terms of keeping the platform in the news itself. So therefore, that has been a unique advertisement and promotion for the Twitter platform for the 5 years that Trump has been using it. And this will become obviously less true when Trump is no longer in post, clearly. And Twitter will continue to benefit from the fact that Trump did use their platform for 5 years. It is a fact of the records, on the records. And so Angela Merkel is getting a moral kind of stance on the record for herself as well. And she's showing courage in the context, because Trump would never have stood up for any rights that Angela Merkel was denied or deprived by anybody. In fact, Trump condemned Angela Merkel many times, more than once. And Trump's condemnation of Angela Merkel was not unconnected. In fact, it was centrally, strategically aimed to undermine the European Union, of which Angela Merkel was a prominent and still remains a prominent, in fact, the most prominent head of government member. So this is not about free speech. This is about moral high ground, and Angela Merkel, by all comparisons in context, occupies the higher ground morally than Donald Trump. She may not do so in comparison to other public figures in the world today, but in comparison with Donald Trump, most people like Angela Merkel would easily fit the description of occupying the moral high ground. And that is one of the lasting kind of legacies that will be referred to, used, cited for a very long time after Trump is no longer in post in the White House. And the Financial Times says on the second lead on the front page, the Northern Ireland shoppers face empty shelves as Brexit snags supply chains. Now, this is the exact opposite of taking back control that Boris Johnson and Michael Gove and Nigel, the nasty racist Farage, boasted would be the case after Brexit was implemented. And it's obvious that most people who oppose Brexit and the lunacies contained in the Brexit agenda warned about this. And the reason why people oppose Brexit is because of eventualities and outcomes and consequences like this one. Northern Ireland shoppers face empty shelves as Brexit snags supply chains. Now, this is not going to be confined to Northern Ireland. This is going to be spreading like the virus. It's like a Brexit virus across the rest of the UK. So the item, which has been contributed to by three people, one from Dublin, one from Florence, and one from London. And there, the Dublin one is Arthur Beasley, and Florence is Patricia Nielsen, and the one in London is George Parker. And their first paragraph, combined first paragraph, is supermarkets in Northern Ireland are struggling to fill their shelves because of the post-Brexit trading arrangements, with hundreds of products caught up in supply chain delays. Now, these delays will get even longer. The delays will get longer, as well as the costs getting higher. And the ordinary customers suffering losses manifold on all fronts. So the poverty level of the ordinary people will get higher, and the denial and deprivation of basic access to amenities and facilities and consumer items will get more difficult and harder. That is directly connected with Brexit. Whatever the details of the agreements, whatever the details, whether it was a good deal or bad deal, Brexit was the bad deal. Either way, whatever way you looked at it. And that is what Corbyn and Starmer and other so-called kind of non-conservatives failed to emphasize or even express in a succinct way that we are doing. Brexit is the snag. Brexit is the loss. Brexit is the epidemic in terms of the benefits that are being lost. Now, the Boris graph has got a misleading photograph of Johnson standing watching a person being vaccinated. And Boris Johnson looks engaged and kind of concerned for the efficiency of the operation. Whereas the real news today is the opposite of that, because Brexit rules have been broken by Johnson. That is the news. But the Boris graph is showing the opposite image of Johnson. And the news is about, in the business section, the news about the Bitcoin sinks 25%. City Watchdog issues warning. The Bitcoin prices crashed 25% after hitting an all-time high, as the City Watchdog warned punters betting on the cryptocurrency that they risked losing all their money. The online currency is now trading at 31,000 pounds dollars per coin, down from $41,500 on January 8. However, it has still more than quadrupled in value over the past year. Following a substantial rally after COVID hit, it came as the Financial Conduct Authority warned speculators that gambling on Bitcoin and other cryptocurrency is an ultra high risk activity. And the fact that there is a warning from the City Watchdog FCA about gamblers on Bitcoin risking losing all their money is not a rare kind of episode or incident. Because most people, what we call the gullibles, most people are intellectually disengaged with the evidence and the facts of what is going on in the so-called economy. And they are taken in, that is, hoodwinked and misled into believing the hype and the propaganda of quick bucks on the gambling circuit. And the gambling has expanded with online facilities. And the main platforms for gambling now include the Bitcoin's various varieties of the cryptocurrencies. And people are losing more money than they can actually afford. So they're getting into debts, and they are getting into debts with the knowledge that there have been warnings that they might lose their money, all their money. And there are various ways of losing money, not only by the uncertainty of gain, which is very rare in gambling anyway, the fact that there are many shrewd gangs of operators who are stealing data, financial data from the punters and abusing the access to those data and ripping them off. And the so-called finance minister, Rishi Sunak, his statement from the Sunday paper, Sunday Boris Graph, is being repeated in the Boris Graph today, which says that the UK economy will get worse before it gets better. Now, that is one of the most abused and misused phrases about a crisis, about a scandal, about a dysfunctioning situation in government and the economy. Of course, it will get worse before it gets better, but that last part, before it gets better, is a completely false and unjustified kind of optimistic note that is added in order to make it palatable, the bad news that is at the center of the actual statement. And there is an item at the bottom of the business section of the Boris Graph, which admits that the self-employed people will suffer mortgage losses. Thousands of self-employed workers face being locked out of the mortgage market by draconian lending restrictions that could force them to raise a deposit of almost £100,000. That's really the reality of that's an aspect of the reality of the denial of housing human rights to people in this country. Making housing a tool for money making is wrong from the start, and it must be scrapped. Housing must be treated as a human right, so that all the burdens of debts and losses and evictions and violations are completely eliminated. The Labour Party is not asking for the ending of housing as a market tool or a market itself, nor is any of the opposition parties, smaller ones like the Greens and the Lib Dems. But there should be. Santander Bank said it was dealing with a backlog of self-employed customers, but added that existing customers who are self-employed could still access loans with a 15% deposit. Now that is one bank, but the other banks are saying Santander has blocked mortgage applications from the self-employed unless they have a deposit of at least 40%. With the average house price standing at 245,000, this means 98,000 pounds deposit. Impossible for most people In fact, the overwhelming majority in housing needs, it is impossible to find 98, even 90%. Even 20,000 pounds is impossible. And they're not talking about the fact that Johnson is not scrapping the HS2, which is being given more than 100 billion pounds to destroy the environment, destroy the countryside. And that is only part of the iceberg. What is happening is with the other hundreds of billions of pounds that Boris Johnson has authorized Rishi Sunak to kind of borrow. Most of that money is going to big business pockets. And there is no accounts of what they're doing with the money published by Fleet Street. Fleet Street is not publishing that fact. So the diagnosis of Fleet Street includes that. And the Daily Express, Beaverbrooks Express, is continuing with the lying headline showing up the image of Boris Johnson and the Tories. And not only on the front page, but in the inside pages, every single item is a positive one, showing up and showing Johnson and his cabal in the best possible light when the daily toll of people dying of coronavirus is increasing. It is nearly 10,000 now, according to their own admission. And they are not actually telling the truth about the actual numbers. They're hiding the actual evidence. And they've got a special promotion again on Kate Middleton. Contrast that with their hostile treatment of Meghan Markle on a daily basis. And the chief scientific advisor Whitty is saying that this is an appalling situation and it is going to get worse. So against that kind of warning, even in the Express, Boris Johnson flouting the rules by going 7 miles away from number 10 Downing Street on a bike ride is ignored by the Daily Express. It's in denial. And there is an item in the racist Daily Express by Jane Garvey, who was a presenter on the BBC Radio's Woman's Hour. that it took her 10 years before she was accepted. What the Daily Express will never tell is how many racist items did she run while she was in that presenter's post, or how many, on average, racist items are aired by the BBC Radio 4 overall, every day, every 24 hours. It is important to mention that because, like their denial of racism and their perpetuation of racism, they are also in denial of the truth, which is why the BBC has ceased to be respected and regarded as a reliable source of information. Well, it was never fully reliable and truthful, but the level to which it has sunk now over the last decades is the lowest. And the Fleet Street newspapers, which normally talk about the role of the BBC in allegedly promoting so-called left-wing ideas and ideologies, it never is interested in the lying by the BBC about racism and about the creation of poverty by the government and the lack of accountability at every level and the corruption of the judicial bureaucracy and the untruthful promotion of the idea that there is a thing called legal aid. There isn't. What there is a disguised business for funding licensed law trader. Now here is a piece by somebody called Ian Jack. I shall discuss this very thoroughly indeed on The Guardian. And it is comparing Crossrail as a representative or representation of an era when London thrived. Now this is multi-layered stupidity and lie and dishonesty, because Crossrail is not an operational outlet. It's not a line that is working. This program is coming as the Khoodeelaar television program. And Khoodeelaar is the campaign that was launched in December 2003 by myself and K. Jordan to oppose Crossrail, particularly Crossrail Hole plotted against the Brick Lane London E1 area. So we know more about Crossrail than Ian Jack will ever do. And we have not seen Ian Jack anywhere in the last 17, 18 years of campaigning against Crossrail Hole. So what is the basis of the assumption that he knows what he's talking about? He's lying. So let's see why he's lying. Now this idiot is not talking about the reality of the transport disaster. The transport disaster that is actually allowed by the Crossrail backing mayor of London at the expense of London, is about the existing network of underground lines and comparatively smaller numbers of overground railway links that are in need of and have been in need of serious repair and serious kind of refurbishment. Instead of doing that, the morons promoting Crossrail at the behest of the big business contractors that wanted the big chunks of the billions of pounds, part of the contract, not part of the service or the provision for an efficient transport network in London, but they wanted to grab hold of the billions of pounds available or made available under the pretext of the Crossrail line. Now, Crossrail line as of today, 12th of January 2021, is not yet started working. So the Guardian's stupid headline to the Ian Jack piece, Crossrail, a memorial to an era when London thrived. London never thrived. London has not thrived for most people in most of the boroughs in London. That's a fact. And the reason why it hasn't thrived is very connected with the same ideology and the outlook of the elected post holders at the expense of London, so-called post of mayor of London and the local councils and the local MPs. London is home to a population. A very large number of people are very poor in London. That is not a statement that can sit with the idea of London thriving. Thriving on what? This idiot, Ian Jack, is one of the Fleet Street names that are career liars, and they perpetrate covering up the truth. Most of the Guardian's coverage during the so-called passage or the process of the Crossrail bill through the Houses of Commons and House of Parliament, House of Peers, most of the Guardian's coverage on the Crossrail was done by somebody else, not by Ian Jack. And the Evening Standard, so-called Evening No Standard. And the reason why it has no standards is connected with the fact that it promoted Crossrail and suppressed the truth. And the BBC and the ITV London outlets. And of course the Times and the Telegraph and the Torygraph. All of those blindly and intentionally dishonestly promoted in an hyper-active and hyper kind of tones and contents the so-called case for Crossrail. Now, we have been saying this for 17, 18 years now, so it's not going to be the first time, but as an update and as a rejoinder, as a rejection of the Ian Jack piece by the Guardian today, let me say this. Crossrail will become operational eventually, 1 year or 2 years from now. But when it does, it will not serve. It will not serve as the bringer of the benefits that the promoters of the Crossrail project have been claiming it would do for years. What it would do is to exacerbate the division between people for whatever reason who have money and people who have not got the money. And it will promote, it will actually encourage the abuse of people and degeneration of people from their home estates and the home areas and local areas. And that will be connected with the fact that the promoters, the speculators, the property speculators will be able to make the false claim that a given property put on the market or a given property is located near Crossrail station or Crossrail line. That is nothing to do with the speed of Crossrail equating to benefit. It is to do with the fact that they can actually peddle the lie that it is near that particular line. And the other aspect of cross-rail promotion has been similar to the HS2 and the high-speed 2 that is now being funded to destroy the countryside, English countryside, from London to Birmingham and beyond. That speed of travel on the cross-rail line would be faster than on anything currently existing on the railway or tube underground network in the Greater London area. The question is, speed for what? Speed on what? Sedap said that you will save 20 minutes of the journey time from the farthest point to the east of London to the center of London. So 20 minutes saving for what? To doing what? Speed of travel being halved or reduced by 20 minutes is meaningless when the cost of traveling on railway networks, general railway networks existing, the cost is rising phenomenally. So the numbers of people traveling on the railway network will be significantly reduced. In fact, 30% of current railway lines have been closed or have been deemed to be not functioning because not enough people are using those lines. So even if there is a speed on the crossrail when it goes operational, it won't be economical. It will not be cost effective. To start on cost effectiveness before looking at other hypes and other promotions and other claims. So therefore it will be beyond the means of people to travel on the crossrail. And it will be even worse on the HS2, hypothetically speaking, that crossrail 2 and HS2 are operational, both operational, whenever that happens. So Fleet Street is lying, and the Guardian is lying today more than it did during the progress or movement of the bill through the two houses of Parliament. And it doesn't say, the young Jack doesn't say what the thriving, the word and the concept and the notion of thriving London is referred to. Tower hamlets, Hackney, Newham, Lewisham, Islington, Camden, Lambeth, Southwark. These are London boroughs that have the combined, and Westminster as well. Between them, England's most poorest persons located in them. And it will not get better. That is to say, the poverty is getting worse, even by the standard of the Guardian group. The rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer. That is what the Guardian has been kind of running the headline in the last 2 days, which is absolutely accurate as headline. But that's it. The Guardian doesn't tell the whole truth. In fact, most of the truth is denied and suppressed by the Guardian, which refuses to tell the truth. And what is happening with the lie for Crossrail is the norm for the Guardian. And the Guardian has got almost in the habit of the Daily Mail and the Scum and the Daily Express. They give the positive kind of gloss to Boris Johnson's failures and unfitness and dishonesty and lying by adding a completely empty positive phrase or word or words. And the Daily Mail is rarely, for the Daily Mail, admitting that Boris Johnson is failing, but they're not calling him as the failure. It says the scientists are urging, number 10, it doesn't say Johnson, to bring in social distancing measures that are tougher than what exists now. And they're putting that as a question mark. It is not the truth which should be. Has Boris brought us to this crisis, to this level of the crisis? That is what the Daily Mail should have done if it were telling the truth. But the Daily Mail is not telling the truth. It's not in the business of telling the truth about Boris Johnson's failures. It's in the business of lying for Johnson. And they are doing a freelance, kind of free-range thing about when everyone will be given the vaccine. Some are saying by April, others, like the Daily Mail now, saying by May. So even the lying, which has been strategically kind of planted in the papers and in the right-wing papers, which is what most of Fleet Street is, even the planted lies are contradictory. And they're again misleading the readers with this headline. Boris Johnson pedals into a storm over lockdown bike ride. Instead of saying Boris Johnson flouts the rules, they're putting the blame at the bike ride, which is exactly what the Guardian is dishonestly doing. They're saying that Boris Johnson is riding the storm. He's not. Boris Johnson is flouting the rules.